William Fulbright in the 1960s began a series of hearings on what was the light at the end of the tunnel in Vietnam, which never appeared. And it was through that kind of probing, which occurred in part because there was a draft. So people like you had to go over there and fight, and it wasn't just all volunteer army where the lower class people did all the dying. Those were the hearings that actually challenged these assumptions. What about Iraq and Afghanistan? There's nothing. Let's just think about what an oversight hearing about our presence in Afghanistan would be. Number one, well, Mr. President, you're saying we're fighting for liberty because they would suffer so terribly without the United States tutelage over there. Then somebody might say, well, Mr. President or Ms. Secretary of State, the Afghan parliament recently passed a law that the President Karzai signed that said any woman in the state of marriage has to submit to any sexual overture of a husband. She can't go outside unless the husband says she can do that. We're fighting for that? That's liberty and freedom? Now, there might be a second question. Why is it that the only way we can prevent another 9/11 is to have our troops thousands of miles away searching in caves? Why can't we have them around the United States? And being alert, we don't want to be reckless. The same way we try to protect ourselves against another Timothy McVeigh. There's certainly a chance we could have a Timothy McVeigh crash into some kind of building and kill hundreds. But we don't have the military going out there and out policing the streets. Why is it only the United States, of all the NATO members, that feels that Afghanistan is a clear and present danger to the safety of all of the world? Why only the United States? Remember, Obama wanted to go to Germany, France, Great Britain, give us more troops. And he preached, like his predecessor, Bush, this is the greatest menace to the history of civilization in the 21st century. These Al-Qaedas. It is worse than the Red Army, worse than the Luftwaffe, worse than Hirohito, worse than all these people combined. This one man who can get up in a video with his beard and say, we're going to kill you, and then, okay, if he says it, then we must go on alert. Suspend habeas corpus, enemy combatants. My gosh, this must be the apocalypse is about ready to hit us. And the reason why these things are said is precisely this attitude of empire. Hey, no one should be able to insult us. We're the United States of America. Why is it you would ask at oversight hearing, how come these NATO countries don't feel this way? Spain has been attacked. Great Britain has been attacked. Indonesia. We tell Pakistan, oh, Al-Qaeda is about ready to overthrow you. You should be terrified. But they sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, well, maybe we know what our vulnerabilities are better than you. So that's what real oversight would be. What is the game plan in Afghanistan? What is the exit strategy? No, Obama has said, all right, now we're not going to build democracy. We're just, in lieu of that, we're not going to do the nation building. We're just going to have a government that's strong enough to prevent Al-Qaeda and Taliban from ever obtaining power again. Well, doesn't that mean you've got to build a country that has legitimacy, that's not corrupt, that's not inefficient, that actually respects liberty? Well, doesn't that mean you're going to be there for the next 50 or 60 years or 100 years? Because in Afghanistan, you're at what I call the pre-Magna Carta stage of political maturity. Magna Carta was 1215 in Great Britain, the first time they tried to incorporate some semblance of law and restraints on the executive branch. You aren't even at Magna Carta stage in Afghanistan. But Congress, because it's, again, imbued with this idea, empire, the president has to decide everything, there are no serious oversight hearing whatsoever. Whatever the president says goes. There's no questioning of what these theories are. How are you going to make the Afghan government not corrupt? It's like the insinuation is that the previous administration had a plan. Let's make the Afghan government corrupt. We want them to take bribes, which is absurd on its face. There's no legitimacy to the government there. That's why people take bribes. There's no sense of an Afghan unity. You've had tribalism there for 4,000 years. So what else is new? The greatness of the Founding Fathers was they knew what they didn't know. They didn't try to overreach. They understood, as John Quincy Adams put it, July 4th address, 1821, we don't go abroad in search of monsters to destroy, which is what empires do. That the influence of the United States abroad would be by force of example. We'd wish freedom everywhere, but we're not going to have the United States force its citizens to go die for someone's liberty in Georgia or Ukraine or China or elsewhere. Because the Constitution itself says, opening preamble, the purpose of this enterprise is to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, period. People want to volunteer to go fight abroad, that's up to them. But the United States government and the United States enterprise is limited under our Constitution to protecting this country, preserving its freedoms, preserving its liberties, and making sure that in the source of trying to go abroad and create a perfect world, we don't destroy our own republic in the process, which is where we are at present. We have destroyed our own republic. Just think of how little we know of what the government's doing today. The idea of self-government, which is the heart and soul of why the United States was different, is that the people need to know what their government is doing and why in order to make a political judgment. You approve or disapprove. That's what the opening words of the Constitution mean. We, the people of the United States, ordain and establish the Constitution. It's not the king giving power down. It's that the government has no authority that we don't give them. And you need to know what your rulers are doing to know whether you approve or disapprove. All the secrecy out there, the Congress makes no inquiry. All the alleged fears out there. Dick Cheney tells us and Obama, all of this surveillance program, all these enemy combatants, they have enabled us to thwart scores of terrorist plots, but they won't tell us what. Why should we believe you? The government's pretty good at leaking out anything they want to leak. And if you had all these success stories, why wouldn't you be leaking them out? So we don't know what our government is doing. All this classified information, state secrets, we still don't know 7 years after the fact. All of us who may have been spied on by the government illegally under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act without warrants, who was spied on? Why did you select them to spy? What's done for the information? Are they getting credit anymore? Are they on the watch list? We don't know. Now, I'll just take a brief diversion into a personal anecdote about my testimony last week, Wednesday. It was before the House Committee on Homeland Security. It was the chairperson is Jane Harman. Now, Jane is someone who you may recall was told earlier on by Bush and Cheney with Nancy Pelosi about the illegal surveillances and torture memos and said nothing because she knew they must have been telling the truth. After all, they come from the executive branch. But Jane was someone who was a great enthusiast for what they call a fusion centers. Now, this is not fusion like in nuclear fusion where you're trying to create power, or fusion that you may use to explode a hydrogen bomb. The fusion centers, it's an odd name, was designed to enlist 800,000 state and local law enforcement officers to spy and gather intelligence on everything that might be an earmark of a future terrorist attack. 800,000. And they were going to do this without violating anyone's privacy or First Amendment rights. And we've had fusion centers around now for many years. They haven't actually shown to have ever stopped anything. And you can imagine, given the complexity of identifying a terrorist, well, what do you look at to see whether someone's a terrorist? Is it what they're saying on the sidewalk? Is it whether they're attending a mosque or a synagogue or a church? And remember, the state, I don't want to be disparaging, the typical state and local law enforcement officer does not have a real high cerebral capacity. No, we need to be worried about it. For example, in Maryland, where they had the state troopers, they thought the future terrorists were those who were protesting the death penalty. They got on the list real fast, and they were listed as terrorists. Now, fortunately, they don't have grades, so you don't get A, B, C, D, E, F, because otherwise they probably would flunk if you had an outside grade. But that's the mindset. Now, my testimony related to what we do know the intelligence reports gathered by these foot soldiers in the war against terrorism. Now, we've got 800,000 state and local officers really make us feel secure. They're so good at making sure there aren't any terrorist cells here. Now, put aside the fact that the FBI has searched for 7 years and they've come up with a number of al-Qaeda terrorist cells in the United States. It's zero. But, hey, this is an empire. We can't take a risk. At the pre-embryonic stage, we need abortions. Now, it sounds oxymoronic. How can you do an abortion at the pre-embryonic stage? But hey, this is terrorism, so don't ask questions. Now, then this particular report out of the fusion centers, wow, they're really frightened of these groups that Islamic radicalism is taking hold. Now, what's the proof? Well, the U.S. Department of Treasury, over on Pennsylvania Avenue, they held a course called Islamic Banking 101. And somebody in Houston got an Islamic banking loan for their home. That was frightening. And then they said, Moreover, they're exploiting the democracy in very insidious ways. For example, they're using hip-hop music to promote their ideas. They're using chat sessions and blogs on the internet. That's really dangerous stuff. And then they're firing their ideas into the political process.